Hello and welcome to Unpreachy, a podcast of homilies from St. John Chrysostom Parish. Today, Father Brian Zumbrum reflects on Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. The Gospel reading for Sunday, July 13th, 2025.
So over the last few days, I, like many of you, have watched with deep sadness as the search continues for those swept away in the flash floods in Texas. And yet, in the midst of such a horrendous tragedy, I found myself deeply moved by the story of Silvana Garza Valdez and Maria Paula Zarate, just two 19-year-old young women from Mexico who happened to be working at Camp Mystic. Some of you have probably seen the story, but in the midst of all the chaos and danger, they ensured that each of the 20 girls in their care made it through. They had the girls write their names on their bodies so they could be easily identified if something happened. They sang songs and played games for hours, trying to keep them calm. And they stayed with them until each young girl was safely rescued. It's a beautiful story, isn't it? Humanity at its absolute best. And yet, is there not a tremendous irony in the fact that these two young women, as Mexican citizens, as Latinas, are being told daily they're not wanted here? That they are the other we are supposed to be fearing. That they are the other we are targeting every day. And yet, despite this, they chose to act out of love anyway. Even if some of the very people whose children's lives they saved would not have wanted them here in the first place. And I must admit, I couldn't help but keep returning to these two women as I listened to our parable once again for this Sunday, because it brought this parable to life in a way that is so easy to miss 2,000 years removed from the cultural setting in which Jesus first uttered it. Because let's be real, how many of us, when we picture this scene, cannot actually imagine how anyone would walk by someone wounded in the road and not stop? And though we may know of the deep distrust and generational hatred between Jewish people and the Samaritans, we still kind of assume that the Samaritan was just doing what any good person would do, what we as good people would do. And yet, I find myself asking, is it really what we would do? I'm not so convinced. Because the more I watch the world around me, and the more I learn the history of this country I claim as my own, the more I see just how many justifications we utter to walk right by. All the ways we convince ourselves that the wounded stranger lying in the street is not our problem. All of the tapes and the seductive lies we whisper to ourselves again and again and again, as if by repetition we could make them true. Well, if they just followed the law, they wouldn't be in this predicament. They brought this on themselves. I don't know them. Their problems aren't mine. I don't have time to get involved. I got way too much happening in my own world right now. What if they're mixed up in things that could get me hurt? I'm afraid of what might happen to me or my family if I get involved. You know what? It's probably safer to just walk on by. They have people for that. Someone will take care of it. It's easy, isn't it? To let those become their own gospel. But the interesting thing is, this parable is Christ's very clear explanation of what love and God and love of neighbor are going to look like if we're going to follow him. And it's going to look like stopping for a lot of wounded strangers on the street. Wounded strangers with criminal backgrounds and skin color of every hue. Wounded strangers who are not going to speak our language. wounded strangers whose lifestyles are going to turn us off or repulse us, wounded strangers whose identity doesn't fit into our boxes and molds, wounded strangers whose wounds are etched so deep in their psyche, where their histories and stories are filled with a darkness and pain that can seem overwhelming. If we are going to follow Christ, we are going to find ourselves stopping at each of these strangers and binding those wounds, and then guiding them to places of safety and hospitality on their journey. And when they leave that proverbial inn, we have been doing the work that the world they encounter when they walk out those doors is one in which they can live in the freedom and the flourishing that is their birthright as children of God. My friends, please have no illusion. This is going to come with a cost. It is written right into the parable with those 2 silver coins dropped on that counter. The cost of this work may be financial. It might be in terms of our reputation. It might be political. It might be in terms of our relationships. But there will be a cost. Make no mistake. But as Christians, we believe that cost is always worth it. That our sister, our brother, our wounded neighbor, they are worth whatever cost. Christ knew this. He was nailed to one for the sake of his neighbors that he loved. May we go and do likewise. May God be praised.
Unpreachy is a production of St. John Chrysostom Parish in Wallingford, Pennsylvania. Visit us at sjcparish.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. This podcast was produced by Brendan Lorden with music by Skytoes on Upbeat. Thanks for listening. Be well.